Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Ripple Movement's live broadcast, which we call the Ripple Hangout because it's on Google Hangout. And yes, thank you for everybody who's tuning in, and indeed for the very first time as well. This is also our first time doing a broadcast, so I do hope that you guys will bear with us as we iron out the kinks and everything. So lots of exciting things happening on the Ripple Movement at the moment. We've just launched our website. So this is all happening very quickly at the moment. So do please bear with us as we work everything out at this stage. And we are going to be giving you a series of updates in the coming weeks. So without further ado, let's get this going. Hello everyone, so my name is Dylan Lowe and I'm the co-founder and project leader of the Ripple Movement. So I think that it should be a bit customary from now on with all the Google Hangouts, all the Ripple Hangouts we're going to do in the future, to talk a little bit about what the Ripple Movement is itself about. So the Ripple Movement is a travel media collective, a collaborative of travel bloggers where we all aim to use travel blogging as a way of raising awareness about social issues. And so we're going to have a range of different independent projects, investigations going on. So we've got things like sign language, environmental conservation, responsible travel. I'm doing something about food anthropology, for instance. And hopefully we're going to be able to track everybody's journey between July and November by the way of a live map that we're going to have hosted on the website. You should be able to see at least a little sneak preview of the map itself on our website, which has just been relaunched, hard launched today, actually. So yay to that. And hopefully you guys are going to check it out if you haven't already and have come from that particular website. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two featured projecteers today who will be joining us and speak about their independent project. So we've got Chris and Tawny, who have currently got their avatar up. I'm not sure if they're still with us at the moment. You still with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there they are. I'm not actually seeing your live feed at the moment, so I'm not sure what's going on there. That is actually interesting. Just let me see if I can... Nope, hang on. Okay, not from here. So we're probably going to go back to them in a second. So we also have Fiona. So say hi to everyone, Fiona.
Hi.
So that's Fiona over there at the moment, who's actually speaking to us from, where are you at the moment, Fiona?
I'm in Solo in Indonesia, which is on Java. It's sort of a smallish city, sort of in the middle of Indonesia. So yeah. So I'll apologise now if the internet connection cuts out at any point. It's not great.
We have actually just tested the internet as well, and that turned out to be just fine earlier with Fiona. So hopefully, yeah, as she said, it's going to hold up for the entire duration of this broadcast. So let's see how it goes. Actually, kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I was actually going to make this into sort of like another experiment / another customary feature of our, the Ripple Hangout in the future. So to kind of like break the ice a little bit as well, just want to ask you guys, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
We haven't actually had breakfast yet because it is pretty early here.
It's very early right now.
So where are you? Chris and Tony, whereabouts are you guys at the moment?
We are in Tacoma, just south of Seattle, in the great state of Washington.
So this is really early for you guys then, isn't it?
It's not too early, but yeah, it's definitely...
We're still a little jet lagged, so we've been waking up pretty early every day, but this is still kind of early.
I mean, I watched the sun come up, so I guess that says something.
You guys just been on the road as well, because you guys have just been traveling around Europe for a little while, and I did see you guys not too long ago over in Costa Brava for that one brief moment that night, and you guys dashed off and did your customary just go and hug everybody who's there. So that was the TBEX conference that we last saw each other as well. So that was fun. That was fun catching up with you guys. And then Fiona, I haven't probably seen you for ever since you took off and went traveling around Southeast Asia. So how's that going?
That's going very well. And to go back to your earlier question, for breakfast this morning, I was staying at a lovely eco lodge near Jakarta. And so I had lovely sourdough toast and boiled eggs and fruit and coffee, which was very nice. And fruit came from their garden, their organic garden, which was amazing.
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
That's what you now want for breakfast.
Yes, I know what we're having now.
It's a quick, clean ride.
Well, I'm definitely getting a bit envious here because I'm over here in London in sort of the headquarters / my own flat where I basically been working on the Ripple movement, and all I had was a double macchiato and a croissant. So probably nothing as glamorous compared to what you guys are having at the moment. So it's great. I mean, with a lot of the Projecteers as well, as you viewers may find in the future episodes, a lot of them are traveling as it is, either already doing something related to their independent projects, doing research for it, or just on the road doing what travel bloggers do best, which is tell the stories. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to share the stories with you in the coming weeks in these episodes. So let's go back to our Projecteers. So that our viewers who are tuning in right now can get to know you guys a bit more, Chris and Tawny, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Of course. Can you see us? Are we still not up?
Oh, you can see it.
Okay, perfect.
Well, after you, please.
Well, I'm Tawny.
And I'm Chris.
And obviously we are Captain and Clark. And, our passion is adventure and travel and storytelling. And also, since we hail from Seattle, it is coffee.
In all its various forms.
So that's kind of where we got what we wanted to do for our Ripple Movement project. And I'll let Chris talk a little more about it.
Yeah, did you want us to talk about that now, or did you want us to get into it in a minute?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, please jump in.
Okay. So the whole idea behind our project is sort of like an anthropological, that's a difficult word, dissection of the different ways that people do coffee, because it's such a universal thing, but it's always done so differently based on the place that it is. And so we're trying to, look at something that's very, very simple and common, but then sort of extrapolate from there the cultural differences of it.
And it's something that brings people together, in so many different cultures. And for example, we were just in Italy, and their coffee culture is so extremely different than ours here in Seattle. So it's always fun to kind of dissect the origins of how coffee is brewed and made and enjoyed around the world.
I mean, something that I definitely want to talk to you guys more in depth in a minute after I've given the spotlight to Fiona, because, over in the UK itself, there's such a diverse coffee scene that doesn't just come from a particular region or has a particular origin. So that's the other thing that I'm particularly interested in myself, which is food anthropology, and that's something I'm going to be documenting in my independent project as well. So yeah, we've got all these diversities of the different emigration from around the world who are actually bringing the different aspects of coffee culture from different parts of the world, from something as recent as the people from Australasia bringing the flat white over to the UK, to maybe even go further back and say the Italians who've actually moved to the UK in the 1930s and populated large parts of Wales because of the mining town. So they kind of brought different coffee scenes into the UK, and it's actually really great to see that being celebrated and being talked about a lot. And I really do love your idea of having the ability to tell the story behind the coffee, just not so much just the enjoyment of the coffee itself, but also the history and origin that comes with it. So I'd love to chat with you more in a second. So going to you, Fiona, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and how long you've been doing it, and maybe a bit about your project as well.
Okay. Up until February, and I was working as a literary agent. I gave that all up to come travelling. I've started in Southeast Asia, which is where I've been since then. And I had a blog that was basically a London food blog with lots of restaurant reviews. I did eat a lot of street food and went to a lot of sub clubs, and I've turned that into a travel blog now. So I tell stories from the road. I'm traveling solo, so I write a lot about that and what that's like, and sort of the difficulties and the pros and minuses. Obviously, having written a food blog, food is one of my main passions. My project is about street food, but sort of looking at it from the angle of the street food vendors rather than from the consumer's point of view. So I eat a lot of street food as I travel, and one of the reasons why I do that is not just because it's cheap and tasty, but because it gives me a way into communities. I always have great conversations with people. It's something where there's always locals and you end up chatting to them. So I'm going to be talking to street food vendors, finding out why they cook the food they do, where the dishes come from, how they cook it, etc., and about their daily lives, and what they think of the community that they're in as well. So it's sort of the food and it's also the people aspect.
And I really do love the amount of depth that you're going to be putting into the aspect of investigating about this thing, because, you know, with food and basically probably every aspect of tourism itself, one of the main issues of not being able to get more in depth and investigate further under the skin of it is time, because people tend to be away for so much a period of time that quite often they don't really have the time to go and establish a personal relationship, or, you know, being able to empathize with the people the same way as somebody who might be actively seeking those things. And one really good example of a travel blogger who's been doing a lot of that is Jodie Ettenberg from the Legal Nomads, who's actually spent a lot of time in Saigon and Chiang Mai as well, over in Vietnam and Thailand respectively, and actually have spent so much time with some of the vendors that a lot of her written stories are actually composed of her interaction with these people. And definitely something that she did talk a little bit about in her book, which is the Traveler's Handbook, which we have actually just featured on the website in our latest article as well. It's something that's really harrowing in a way that people actually do have the awareness and the desire to go and see beyond the things that they're eating and taste beyond it and actually get to know the lives behind it. So yeah, it's a fantastic project that you've got going on. I really am once again looking forward to seeing more of it as well. So I'm going to go back to Chris and Tawny for the time being to talk a little bit about the social aspects of it, because, you know, with coffee, like you said, there's such a social implication about it. It's what society is made of. You know, society, if you think about it, probably, you know, if you can think of a homogenous smell of society, quite often the first thing that you think of is the smell of either coffee or straight caffeine. And so this is kind of like one thing that brings everybody together, isn't it? You know, when you socialize in coffee shops or sort of things like that. So, you know, what kind of things are you finding on your journeys in particular? Because you guys have been actively seeking the stories behind it, making observations about coffee cultures and things like that. So what are the things you're finding at the moment, and what are the things that you're looking forward to the most about investigating in the future?
The things that are so exciting to me are the little nuances that make the coffee ritual, as I call it, different. And I think that's kind of the cornerstone of our whole piece here, is that coffee is a ritual everywhere that we go. Not so much just a functional drink, but you find it in these gathering places, these social hubs, and then the way that people do it becomes so important. And I think that's what we found in Italy, is that there's this whole unwritten handbook of how you can drink coffee and how you can't drink coffee.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. And Italy was just fresh on our minds because we were just there. But, you know, Italians typically will go to a cafe and they will stand. They don't really sit. And they, you know, in the morning, you have your cappuccino or your macchiato or your latte or anything with milk. And then after about 11, you don't do that anymore. As opposed to being in Washington. And I have to say Washington because even in our own country, there are places where coffee is done so radically different than we do it in our state. And, you know, it's very much a social thing. Or, you know, you get this big 24-ounce caramel mocha frappuccino and you go out and enjoy your day on the road. And a lot of cultures think it's so silly that we take our coffee to go. So I think it's fun coming from a state where we kind of mix it up a little bit. But, I mean, just from our, I guess, initial findings, I've really enjoyed seeing the way that coffee is presented and brewed, you know, from Turkish and Greek coffee to coffee in Thailand that comes in, you know, bags with condensed milk. It's been fun to, you know, sip a little bit of the world every time through a nice cup of joe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can see that there's definitely some sort of tourism implication of it as well, because, you know, once again, I'm probably going to go back to Fiona in a minute because I'm now touching into Southeast Asian cuisines territory. But with something like Thai food, for instance, quite often, you know, when you go to a Thai restaurant in the local area, you have a taste of Thailand, and then you suddenly feel as if you want to go to Thailand yourself. The same way that with a lot of coffee rituals, as you said. One of the most mesmerizing ones is actually the Ethiopian coffee ceremony that I've had in the past, and kind of that's one of the things on top of the, you know, the Ethiopian food that I actually do enjoy quite often, is one of the aspects that really wants to, it's something that I really drives me to want to go to Ethiopia eventually and go and see it for myself where it's being homegrown. So do you have any particular scenarios or particular stories in the past that actually, you know, when you've experienced a particular coffee culture and you ended up going to the place yourself to go and see for yourself how it's actually like in its country and place of origin?
Well, I was a barista all through university, so for me it was always where kind of I got my inspiration, and there would be people that would come in fresh off a trip and they'd be like, I want a cappuccino like they would make in Italy. I'd be like, well, great, I have no idea what you mean. And so for me, the first time I went to Italy and actually saw, oh, a cappuccino is so different than how we make it here, has been kind of interesting. I'm trying to think of, another example is the Thai coffee, the Thai iced coffee, because we loved Thai food forever, and before we went to Thailand, we would always get our regular, and then we'd always end with Thai iced coffee. And so to actually get it in a little baggie in Thailand was so exciting for both of us.
Absolutely. It's so difficult. I think we've been looking at it so long, it's hard to trace it back to the origins at this point. But I feel like it might have been Vietnamese coffee for me. Really, like, early teens, I went out to a Vietnamese restaurant and got my first Vietnamese coffee, and it just completely blew my mind that something I had interacted with for so long could be done so radically different. And I think that was sort of the beginning, which may have influenced where we are now.
Yeah, and most recently, I think he got the shock when we were in France that in the mornings they drink their coffee
out of a bowl.
Out of a bowl.
What? Like a cereal bowl.
I love it.
It's like a sort of slightly enlarged cappuccino cup, except, you know, basically, you know, what normal people would call a bowl.
Yeah, because there's no handle. You just pick it up with both hands and
like an actual bowl.
Like a soup bowl.
So the whys behind all these seemingly strange coffee traditions are what really get my engine running. Yeah.
And as I know that, Fiona, you are quite a coffee enthusiast yourself as well. I mean, especially when you've been in Southeast Asia for all this time, I mean, with all the sort of almost exotic ways of preparing coffee. I mean, you know, I can testify to when I was growing up in Hong Kong as well, when there's actually a specific drink that is basically coffee and tea mixed together, and they call it sort of some kind of a local delicacy. And I just sort of, you know, I can kind of enjoy it sometimes, but other times I just have to grimace at it. So what kind of things are you finding at the moment? And you know, I think the golden question as well is, and because I know you well enough for that, how much are you missing your flat whites?
A lot. Well, I was going to say that a couple of days ago I had luwak, which is coffee that the beans have gone through a luwak, rescued from the poo of a luwak, and they're washed plenty of times and then ground. And I had that for the first time and was very impressed with it. There's something in the digestive enzymes that lowers the caffeine and acidity. So it was delicious, and I was drinking it at a little coffee shop as a luwak itself ran around the floor licking my ankles, which was fantastic. But it didn't get off the best. They just drink sachets of.
Okay, I think we might be losing Fiona a little bit just there. Are you still there?
Oh no.
Oh no. So the internet has finally caved for the time being. So I'm just going to suggest to Fiona to probably restart and come back in. And so, yeah, I'm just going to go back to you and Chris and Tawny. So, I mean, it's actually quite funny that Fiona mentioned about the whole different types of coffee. Well, let's say the extraordinary ones, not so much the average ones, because I can only imagine that if it's being triple washed, then, you know, the odors of, you know, whatever would have been washed away at least by then.
That's an expensive cup of coffee, too.
It really is.
It really, it's kind of mind-blowing as well, because, you know, even in London, they do actually have restaurants where they manage to source that. And it's another thing about London is that you can actually, when it comes down to anything palatal, really, there's always some way of finding them. And one of my favourite cafes in London is Monmouth Coffee over in Borough Market, where, you know, this is actually somewhere where I would really go and spend some time tasting every type of coffee bean and basically realise what I want for the time being. And that is actually where you really do get to learn about the diversity of the different flavour profiles of coffee as well. Because if you think about it, coffee isn't just like a homogenous being or anything like that. Coffee isn't just, you know, a singular tasting thing, but prepared in different ways depending on the amount of milk or the amount of water you put into it. So I think the main thing that I want to discuss really is do you think the same way where in different cultures, what people eat, whether, you know, if they eat predominantly spicy food in a culture, they tend to be a bit more fiery, or if they eat sweet things, they tend to be a bit sweeter. The same way do you think it actually occurs in coffee? Because you've got the South American beans that tend to be leaning on the acidity side, and you've got the Ethiopian bean that's actually sort of with that fermented aftertaste to it, with the umami in it. Do you think there's actually that kind of thing going on? I mean, I don't know if it's something that you've ever thought about, but, you know, I just thought that it might be a very interesting thing to discuss right now.
Yeah, that's actually something that we were talking about recently, because it's very much, you know, kind of this on the same level as like wines, and I prefer, you know, these darker, richer roasts. I think we both do, but it's been fun to kind of trace and track where coffee's coming from, and like the Kona coffee in Hawaii or Ethiopian, and how it's, you know, the process, and then the difference between like the Arabica beans, which is primarily what we drink, and then the Robusta, and so I think it started out as a superficial just thing that we like to do and taste coffee around the world, but as we continue to go through it, it's getting deeper. And Chris actually just got a new.
I don't know if you can see it.
Can you see it?
But it's essentially like a moleskin, and it's got these wheels inside that are flavor profiles of all the different coffee that you taste. So no, I haven't gone so far as putting the pieces together on this one, but it's definitely been something that we're starting to delve into. Because I don't know, I think I was looking at it almost too superficial in the beginning, of just like the way that it's served and the way that you interact during it. I didn't even think about jumping full bore into the sort of roast that people like. And then even beyond that to the bean, like there's so many layers of customization to coffee, it's staggering.
It's definitely something that I've encountered recently as well. The last time I actually did see a wheel like that was from one of our local baristas, Rohan, who works in my local cafe. And he's actually somebody who's been not just preparing coffee, but actually been doing it competitively as well, where he's one of the current sort of champions of coffee latte art competitors, actually. And his friend, who's actually also an expert barista, has actually just been involved in a competition recently to basically concoct different types of coffee-related cocktails or coffee-related compound drinks and things like that. So that's the thing, though. I mean, have you guys actually ever encountered that sort of competitive edge of coffee making as well? Have you actually, seen how that's impacted people and societies, and how people are socially interacting with each other because there is somewhat competitive in the whole coffee preparation scene?
I'm married into that.
Definitely, yeah. I used to participate in latte art competitions when I was a barista, and I mean, especially here in Seattle, you see it a lot. There are a lot of coffee conventions, and just, along our street, there are so many different cafes where you need to decide whether you want to go based on the taste of the coffee, based on how to prepare their drinks, based on the latte art. And so it's fun to interact with that community and then see how, these close-knit baristas kind of showcase their talents to their community and the locals. And so, there are some places where you're going to get that fine-tuning and that latte art, and then there are places where coffee is strictly get your caffeine and go to work. And so it's been fun for us to see, how in different parts of the world that even the showcase aspect of it is. And it's, like I said, so different. We were in Virginia, and all we wanted was a cup of, decent coffee. And we drove around for 2 hours until we found the one and only Starbucks in the entire state. And it was very much like, all right, here's your latte, bye. So it's fun. It's been fun to see the different ways that people interact around this amazing drink.
Yeah. And I think Seattle, unfortunately, gets sort of a bad reputation because everyone just immediately associates Starbucks as if it were the only coffee we had available here. But with over 1,400 coffee shops just in the Seattle area, the vast majority of which are independent, you get such a wide array of not only different beans, different roasters, different schools of thought completely. And so you really get to see the coffee culture blossom out of that as people get more and more competitive and it becomes more and more a part of their identity.
Yeah, and I suppose that very much the reason why you decided to go deep into the coffee scene and the coffee culture and the society and the social aspect of it is because of the place where you sort of have that awakening of it, isn't it? And that's exactly what Seattle is for you guys, is the place where you can kind of see it firsthand, how it does have that social implication. And then you can sort of take that and then pack it in your bag and bring it abroad with you, because it is existent around the world. And you're right that every single culture in every single place has its own sort of coffee culture to contribute to the worldwide scene of coffee. It's not like a singular entity either, is it?
Yeah.
So, on that note, I'm just going to go to you, Fiona, because I think similarly you've got that sort of sense of awakening as well when you have lived in London all this time, and I know for sure as well with all of these different street food incentives that are actually opening up. I actually went to Dalston the other day for the first time, where there's actually a sort of street food collective going on, Dalston Yard, I believe it's called, or Dalston Street Eats. And so, yeah, I mean, when you actually did the interview with us as well, you mentioned something about how London was the place where you first had your eyes open about street food. And, curious enough, that street food scene probably didn't exist about 5 years ago, and all of a sudden it's actually just started opening up as well. So, I mean, how was it for you? How was it that London was sort of like the birthplace of your awareness of street food in the first place?
It really was. I ate. I used to love. I think it was called. It was before it was called Curb. It was when it was called Eat Street. That was probably the first street food in London that I really sort of ate. And it was just north of King's Cross, very close to where I worked. And I just used to go along at lunchtime and get something to eat there. But I think the London street food scene is very interesting in that it's become about these destinations, these sort of hubs, there's sort of Street Feast and Curb, and I mean, lots of different ones that have even opened up while I haven't been there, which people sort of end up travelling for. For miles. They cross London. I mean, I've crossed London plenty of times to go to a street food festival, when actually the root of street food is about convenience. It's about it being right outside someone's door. And so it's very interesting coming over here and seeing how street food is here. And it's not about these big markets. It's about, the few little stalls at the side of the road. So that was really interesting for me.
And how much did you actually manage to, you know, get to investigate about the faces behind street food when you were in London? I mean, did you actually get any of that going? Did you kind of end up having sort of a connection with some of these people who, you know, would be regularly serving you food because it's close to where you work and everything? Because, you know, in this sense, you're kind of subtracting the time element and say, you know, you were not actually just staying in one place temporarily. You just keep going back to it. And in a sense, you know, you do have the opportunity to talk to people. You do have the opportunity to get to know their stories and tell them afterwards. I mean, how was it for you when you were in London? Okay, I think we've just lost Fiona just now. Have we completely lost her?
She pops in and out.
Lost.
In and out.
Oh, there she is.
It's too soon to give up on her.
Way too soon to give up on her. If anything, we do still have the rest of the half an hour to film. Not that you guys are not, you know, interesting or anything like that.
I mean, I see where
the social balance account and everything, because, you know, we do want to talk about all things palatal as well. So that food is still sort of half the equation. And it's a shame that we don't have somebody who might be actually talking a little bit about alcohol and sort of like the different aspects of, you know, anything that could be tasted. So now that we have Fiona back, hello again.
Okay.
I don't think that I can actually see that screen this time. Could it be because I'm... Okay. So we've got this thing going on where when I do click on her profile, it's not showing up.
Wow.
So, Fiona, can you hear us?
Your internet might have just given up. Oh, there we are.
No, I think this is just her screen frozen, actually. So I do hope that she's gonna. Well, at the sidebar of the group chat is it has said that actually Fiona Barrows has left the group chat. So I'm assuming probably just restarting it at the moment. So, but we'll go back to you, Chris and Tawny, about, you know, basically with back to your other side of the palatal side of things. I mean, how often do you actually get to know the people behind the coffee scenes, and how often do you get to reach behind a counter and get to know the people? I mean, with Tawny, I mean, you used to be a barista yourself, then at least through your workplace you would have had a connection with all these people, but how often do you get to actually know these people who prepare your coffee on the road, and how often do you get to know their stories as you go along?
I'm going to say pretty often. And for whatever reason, coffee is one of those things like a sports team, where if you really want to get someone going on it, you just have to poke them a little bit. Bear with me.
I'm going to wait for this to come back around.
I'm basing this on the fact that we were just in Italy, and inevitably, anytime we'd start a conversation with someone, they'd be like, "Where are you from?" We're like, "Oh, Seattle." They're like, "Oh, Starbucks. You must be so glad you're in Italy now, where the coffee is good." And then that's it. From there, it's all the game.
That is so true. That's pretty much, you know, how we get our foot in the door. You say you're from Seattle, our minds go to Starbucks, and then they're either like, "Wow, Starbucks," or like, "Ooh, you guys drink Starbucks."
It's like walking into a room in the UK and being like, "Well, Manchester Youth, they're kind of a terrible team, right?" Instant debate. So I think we do a very good job of at least starting spirited, but, you know, coffee, if you can hold your own in the first 5 minutes of the conversation, you can really get deep with someone. And I think you can surprise people often how passionate they were about something that really is they normally consider to be innocuous.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as well. And back to you, Fiona, now that you've been resurrected welcome to the land of the living. So how often do you get to see the passion of the people who are, you know, the street food vendors? I mean, either in London or over in Southeast Asia, where you are right now.
Well, I had fantastic street food the other night here in Indonesia. I went to a little place with a guy who kills a kid goat every morning, and then he sells food until he runs out, and then anything he doesn't sell that day is put in the bin, and he just sort of carves. It's all sort of hanging up in bits around him, and he just sort of carves off a little piece to put on a satay stick or to put in a soup. and it's fantastic. But I think what's really interesting here is that each country I go to, the street food culture is very different. It's not sort of Southeast Asian street food culture. So in Bangkok, for instance, everyone eats street food. Hardly anyone has a kitchen because houses are too small. So absolutely everyone eats on the streets. Whereas here in Indonesia, what I've realised is that home cooking is a really big thing. It's a very traditional society, very conservative. You don't see very many women around in the evenings because they're all at home cooking. So the people who eat street food here tend to be sort of young men who don't necessarily have someone at home to cook for them. So it's a very different, and I find that really interesting, very different sort of cultures around street food everywhere I go.
It's a very interesting dynamic you mentioned as well, because I guess a lot of us don't sort of think about it like that when it comes down to street food. It's not really, we don't think of it as a cessation of a particular social need, for instance. So, for somewhere like Spain, for instance, in Madrid, where people's apartments are very tiny, they don't have enough space to invite their friends over and have them, cook for them or anything like that, which is why there are tapas bars out there, which is why people tend to hang out on the streets. And that isn't something that people tend to necessarily associate with the Spanish cuisine or the Spanish gastronomic scene, especially in capital cities like Madrid. So yeah, it's a fantastic thought actually. It's something that I can only assume that you'll be digging deeper into as part of your investigation, Fiona.
Yes, absolutely. I'm starting it, I'll probably still be here in Indonesia, then going to Vietnam, and then China, and then Hong Kong. And I think they're all places that have got very different street food cultures. And also the culture changes the sort of dishes that are cooked. So because, again, going back to Bangkok, because everyone eats it, there's quite a lot of basic food. There's a lot of pad thai, a lot of rice and everything. And then here, it tends to be dishes that are a bit harder to cook. So the kid goat, for instance, no one's going to go and buy a whole goat to feed their family. It just wouldn't work. So it tends to be things like that. And there was another place that did fantastic duck that I went to. So it tends to be slightly different food because of the need of the people. And that's why I love street food so much, is because it comes from the need of the locals. It's nothing to do with tourism. A street food vendor can't survive on tourists. They need to have a reputation in the community for providing good, safe, good food. And so it's all about what the community wants, and I really like that aspect of street food. And it's just a surefire way of eating what the locals eat, which I really like doing when I travel. Yeah.
And well, let's go from there. Actually, I mean, what are the examples of the best street food you've had, and which are the most sort of impassioned stories you've encountered along the way? I mean, you've been in Southeast Asia for quite a few months now, since almost the beginning of the year, actually. So you must have had a brilliant amount of encounters so far. Which ones are the best, your pick of street foods that you've had, and which ones in particular have a sort of a story behind it?
The best street food meal I've had was in Bangkok. It was from a woman at the end of a road where my guest house was, and she served seafood, and I'm a massive fan of seafood. So as soon as I walked past her stall, I sort of saw what she was selling and got quite excited. And I've never seen such fresh seafood. The squid was white and glistening and beautiful. And she was really grumpy, actually. She was horrible. She was really unhelpful to me. I sort of went along, I was like, right, okay, I need to eat this. And she was awful. She wasn't helping me. I tried sort of pointing. I tried sort of miming. I had to sort of speak any English. I had to sort of mime how I wanted everything. And eventually I got one, and I had tom yam, best one I've had in all of Bangkok. And I had grilled crab, barbecued crab and rice, and then barbecued mussels as well. And it was just fantastic. I mean, it's the best seafood I've probably ever had. And she was really grumpy. She didn't really sort of puffed out. And then she came over to clean my plate at the end, and she saw my crab, and she sort of it like that. And she saw that she pulled every single from the crab, and she was very impressed. And
Yeah, so we kind of picked up bits and bobs of a story there, Fiona. That was very impassioned. I can kind of see the sort of split screens of your hands flashing in the air. And,
it was so good too.
I know.
Yeah.
Like so many cliffhangers. I was dying.
Well, we got a bit passionate as well. How often?
I mean, this is.
I mean, I don't think I can very often hear people actually describe food as beautiful and glistening. I mean, at least that bit I actually did hear and did need you to mime your way along. So, I mean, from what I can understand, at least, the bits that I picked up was that when you ordered the food, you kind of had a difficulty of, speaking to the lady and getting her to understand exactly what you want. Now, I'm just going to go. I'm going to segue a little bit to the sort of the documentation of your project a little bit. I mean, from the sounds of it, and I can definitely relate to it as well, that there's always going to be the language barrier, there's always going to be the cultural barrier as well. How do you perceive yourself, how do you predict yourself being able to overcome that barrier when you do want to have that personal connection with somebody, when you want to establish that in order to, basically take a little bit of them, really, which are their stories, and how are you planning on documenting it?
I think the one thing I do have on my side is time. I tend to spend quite a lot of time in places. So I do often find that when I go back to especially a street food vendor, they instantly recognise me and they do instantly look really pleased. It's another level, it's another notch up. With regards to the language barrier, I do a lot of food tours, and I'm going to have to in some places get a translator. So I think my first point of call is going to be organising to do food tours, and then talking to the person who's running them and seeing whether I can hire them for a day or two to come and help me translate, and get their suggestions on who to meet. It is going to be difficult. It depends very much on the country. I've noticed here in Indonesia that actually people speak quite good English, and I've been able to have conversations with people, something I couldn't do at all in Myanmar. So it's going to depend, but it's really going to be a case of finding a local, either through my guest house or through food tours, and asking them to help me. I'm going to be documenting it in blog posts and then also in short videos, either on Vine or Instagram or possibly YouTube. But it's really, for me, it's all about storytelling. So it's about telling the story, and I really want to do that through writing primarily.
Fantastic. Really looking forward to it. That's definitely one of the projects that I'm, that particular aspect of it is something that I'm very much looking forward to. And it is really very much the social implication of it, isn't it? And, with you guys, Chris and Tawny, because, now we're just talking about, we've established that with the coffee culture is more than just a cup of coffee. It's about, what binds societies together. Specifically, how would you plan to document that essence, that societal aspect of coffee, when quite often what you do have the availability to document is just an Instagram photo of a cup of coffee, and even though that you may be able to tell a story behind it. I mean, you guys are brilliant videographers yourselves. Do you have an idea of how you're going to be getting that on the road? Do you have an idea how you're going to be approaching people about incorporating their stories into this, and how you are going to basically present it to the world?
I think I might have already showed my hand on this one. We do have one part which is a dedicated Instagram to coffee around the world, trying to show that nuance in a single picture. But also, we really do want to lean heavily on video on this one. And like I said earlier, the best way to get people to talk on camera about that is just to make them feel defensive about their coffee.
and like Fiona said, I mean, we do a lot of tours as well, food tours and otherwise, and a lot of times we'll ask our guide, especially if it's a long tour, hey, can we take a break and get a little bit of coffee? Or after the tour, we'll be like, hey, can we, recommend a good coffee place for us? And so that's a good way to get dialogue started with our tour guide and someone who we can obviously communicate with, and then branch out from there. So I think it's going to be interesting for us to document it, because we'll have to, obviously video is kind of our favorite way to showcase a place, and so we're going to have to get multiple parts, the coffee, hopefully the barista and a local, and then obviously dig even deeper. So there's so many layers that I think maybe the first country is going to be, you know, an experiment in and of itself. But we've been doing this for a few years now, preparing for this, you know, great project that we didn't even know was going to happen. So I think in a lot of ways it's going to be an experiment for us, but then I think in a lot of other ways we're kind of already set up to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that to a massive extent, you guys have been spending so much time piquing people's curiosity about, well, coffee and your documentation of coffee, and you know, you're just sort of almost inviting people to stare a bit deeper into the coffee cup. I mean, pardon the, you know, the teacup analogy there, and try to find out more about what you guys plan to take this whole coffee investigation to, what stage. So, you know, once again, really looking forward to that too. So I'm just going to go to the Q&A section, which is currently blank. And so I'm just going to tell you guys to, well, I mean, you know, in this sense, our viewers right now, if you do plan on tuning into some of the future editions, which will be hosting very soon, actually, there's going to be 2 Hangout sessions happening on Wednesday itself. If you do plan on tuning in, I would urge you to send in your questions. I'd love to address them, and I'm going to get the Projecteers who are being featured to answer them as best as they can, and hopefully that will satiate your curiosity about what all this is going on. So going back to Fiona, you did mention just now that you have a bunch of destinations in mind that you're going to be visiting in the very near future, actually, seeing that you are on the road right now. Any particular destinations that you're looking forward to the most of visiting? I mean, is there any particular food scene that you've looked into already that you just can't wait to get your hands onto, you know, the beautiful, pristine food they have in the places?
I think Vietnam. I have been excited about the food there for quite a while. A lot of food in the rest of Southeast Asia can be quite oily, and it can be very meat heavy. And the thing about Vietnam is, my understanding of it so far is it's very light, it's very fresh, it's lots of vegetables, rice noodles, and I think that would be a really nice change of pace. And the street food scene there is meant to be fantastic, so I'm really looking forward to Vietnam. I think it's going to be really good.
And then you're going to be in Singapore soon as well, aren't you?
I've been in Singapore, actually. I've just come from there.
And that is almost like a slightly, it was almost like a completely different street food scene altogether there, isn't it? It's kind of a sort of almost like a controlled environment, even with a hawker market.
Clean. It was just, it's so, everything is very clean and pristine too. I mean, I didn't actually, I ate some hawker food when I was there, but to me it wasn't, it didn't have what I love about street food. That sort of felt like it had been stripped away. So I didn't actually eat that much street food when I was in Singapore.
Yeah, and I guess that's another aspect of, Fiona, your project that I probably am looking forward to the most of seeing as well. Sort of, you know, to actually consider the definition of street food as well. And it's not just sort of a universal sort of definition of, you know, food being served on the street is considered street food, but everybody's consideration of street food and how they define it inside them. And so, yeah, that's another thing that I really look forward to seeing more of from you in your documentation in the near future. So with you guys, Chris and Tawny, I mean, do you guys have any destination in mind that you're thinking about to take your investigation to, and specifically what kind of coffee scenes that you're going to be looking at?
You know, it's up in the air right now, but our tentative plan is we're thinking about dropping into Hawaii this summer, back to Tawny's homeland, and sort of looking at the only place in the U.S. where we grow coffee, then jumping back to the Pacific Northwest and looking at sort of the major coffee production hub. And then this fall we're going to be in Europe, and that's still around. We're definitely Spain, but maybe Portugal, and obviously we're toying around with Italy. So sort of looking at the, I don't know, new to old as far as coffee in the Western world, but doing it in reverse chronological order, if that makes any sense. So we'll see, looking at the coffee journey from there, sort of tracing it back to its roots as a social aspect.
Yeah, but it's not exactly, anthropologically speaking, anti-directional, is it? Because that's kind of where the movement of coffee actually went as it sort of got introduced to the old world from the new world. So that makes perfect sense to me as well.
Perfect.
As long as you're on board, we're good.
Yep, there's that. And, seriously, I mean, with both of these projects, they covered, the different aspects of what we taste on a daily basis, and probably don't think enough of. And that's one damn shame that I do think is about both food itself and things like coffee and alcohol, where there's so much refinement in dedication of producing these ingredients and basically getting them to what they are, which is sort of the start and finish process of it. And so, with that further social implication of almost like the dedication, the obsession of the people who are growing the beans, preparing the food itself. I'm just wondering if you guys have any thoughts on that. I mean, are you guys going to go all the way back to the stage where these dishes and coffee isn't necessarily just been prepared, but actually produced in its rawest ingredients as well? Fiona, I mean, you're the one who's going to be sort of investigating the street food. I think we might have lost Fiona again. Okay, Chris and Tawny, the backup plan. Okay, maybe not the backup plan. the co-panelists. So you guys did talk about, going and see the coffee beans and see where it's been produced in Hawaii as well. How far back would you like to go? I mean, in terms of the whole operation chain, how far would you want to see it?
I mean, I would love to go back all the way to the beginning. It wasn't something we initially wanted to do, but there's been some research coming out recently saying that of the 200 species of coffee varietals, the two that people use the most are in threat of going extinct in the next 20 years. So that's something that we'd like to touch on. I think.
Yeah, I would love to go back and, it's so interesting, like when we were in Hawaii, to see, the cherries that will eventually become this coffee, and the actual seed that is really what we refer to as the bean. And with all things, we're always wondering who figured out that if you take the seed out and you roast it and then you distill it and you'll have this coffee. And who found out about, let's let this giant jungle cat eat these beans and then we'll clean it and we'll make coffee. Like, it's so interesting to me how we got from this little cherry to something we drink every day. So if we could go, I would love to go as far back as possible. It just kind of depends if we can make it to those regions.
Yeah, but everyone loves a good origin story. Look at Batman Begins.
Exactly. Or Iron Man and all that. Still the best Iron Man film out there. Hands down. So Fiona, if she is amongst us, unfortunately, she did try signing back in. Hello, welcome back. So I'm going to ask the same question to you, Fiona. How far back would you like to see the production chain, per se? How far back would you like to sort of retrace the steps from the basically from the person who's preparing the food all the way to where the ingredients are being sourced?
I mean, I love Southeast Asian markets, and I love looking around them, and that is where pretty much everyone gets their ingredients from. And I think the ingredients that go into food are very interesting in themselves, because I think you have, especially here, there's a lot of ingredients that have come from different countries. So a lot of sort of Indian spices, and you get sort of coconut milk that's come in. And that has a big impact on the food, as you're sort of looking at a bit, sort of the anthropology, like where these ingredients come from. But I also think that it's not just the ingredients themselves, it's also culture that comes along with ingredients. So quite often you find in countries where there's lots of Indian ingredients, they're like, turmeric and all the spices and everything. There'll also be a big Indian influence on the culture, and I think that's really interesting as well. So I'd love to look at where, so going back, first of all, with what you have in your hand, a physical thing, back to how it is made and where the ingredients come from. And then also back in time with the recipes and where they've come from. And, you know, who sort of came up with them and the sort of the history of the recipes as well.
Fantastic. And yeah, that would be really fascinating as well, because, you know, one of the aspects of Southeast Asia that a lot of people, a lot of tourists at least, do tend to go and see are the markets, and, you know, to basically be surrounded by all the exotic ingredients as you go along, but not having the full knowledge of what they're being used in, or probably would have no awareness of where they'd be used in, even though they're probably having, you know, they're tasting the end product already at the street food stall of some sort. So no, it'll be fantastic. I mean, would you consider actually going in and speak to some of the producers of these ingredients, or, you know, even just the people who are, you know, the vendors in markets, not necessarily the street food vendors?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very interesting, because a lot of street food, it's not very, it uses a lot of local ingredients. I think you quite often find, or ingredients that it uses a lot of cheap ingredients. So ingredients that are imported in are often that little bit more expensive. So a lot of the ingredients used, especially sort of the main ingredients, are all local, are all locally grown. And even now, I mean, I've been in Southeast Asia for 3.5 months. I go to markets and I still see food that I don't know what it is. I come across a fruit or a vegetable and I have no idea what it is. And I'm still coming across new ingredients, and there are different ingredients in every single country I go to. And I think that's really interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fiona. And as much as I'd love to talk to you guys till, you know, the rest of eternity, and, you know, till Kingdom Come and everything, we are kind of approaching the hour. So it's now officially, the clock just ticked, 3 p.m. in the UK. So we're going to really quickly wrap this one up. Thank you so much to all three of my projecteers, all three of our projecteers, for joining in. So Chris and Tawny over there, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing your coffee culture and investigation of the entire thing. And Fiona, good luck with your travels over in Southeast Asia. She's just gone MIA again, I'm sure. But yeah, she's probably dropped out. No, she's back. She's here. She hasn't dropped out prematurely. So Fiona, good luck with the rest of your journey in Southeast Asia, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be tasting a lot of fantastic street food and coming with all sorts of warm stories as you go along. So, and it's also goodbye from me for the time being. So the Ripple Movement Hangout is going to be happening on Wednesday at the same time as this broadcast, so 2 p.m. UK time. We're also going to have an extra hangout session that particular evening at 7 p.m. UK time as well. So I do look forward to speaking to you guys again, and I do look forward to presenting to you all our projects and their fantastic independent projects. So it's goodbye from all of us, and hopefully you're going to tune in again soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You guys.